Welcome,
Hello,
everyone.
everyone.
My name is Philipp. I'm the founder of Custify, and I'm here today with Ingmar from ChartMogul. Welcome to the podcast, Ingmar. How
Thank
are you
you,
today?
Philip. It's great to be here. I'm great. How are you?
Excellent. We were just like before we started going live here, we were just like chatting a little bit. And I'm based in Germany, and we had a real heat wave here. So I was telling Ingmar that yesterday it was almost impossible to work, and today luckily we had some thunderstorms going over, and today is a bit more work friendly. We still give probably guys to join a little bit. I can see many people are joining just now. Yeah, while we wait here, welcome everyone. Maybe you drop us a short message in the chat just to try out the software here. We have this webinar run on Livestorm. You see three things down there. One is polls, one is questions, one is a chat. So welcome everyone in the chat. So feel free to leave us a short message there, just dropping by where you are. If it's as hot as it was in Germany for you guys. Ingmar, you're based right now in Canada, right?
Yes, I'm in Toronto. I used to be based in Berlin as well, so I can relate to the increasingly hot summers and the lack of air conditioning in Berlin.
Yeah, it's not just Berlin. It's a general German problem, I think, with the air conditionings. And how is it there?
Yeah, that's
Right now?
one of the nice things of living in Toronto is that a lot of the apartment buildings here, the majority have air conditioning installed, and it's only a few hot days really per year, but it's a nice to have. So I'm really glad that I have it now.
Well. Guys, yeah, just a bit housekeeping. We're gonna kick things off in a second. So you have the chat there. Feel free to leave us a message there. If you have any questions throughout the presentation from Ingmar, feel free to drop them directly in the questions tab. That helps us later when we have a Q&A session to go over it, and we try to answer every question. From a structure, I think we're gonna have like half an hour, maybe a few minutes more from Ingmar's side. And then we open it to the stage. We can answer questions. You guys can interact with us. If you have any questions, you might be in a similar stage. You might face similar challenges that Ingmar already has solved. So welcome everyone. And Ingmar, if you're ready, I think we can kick things off.
Sounds great. Let's go.
Awesome. Well, Ingmar, the title today is about ChartMogul's journey and giving people a little bit advice if they are in a similar stage where you were. What was that, about 2.5 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, something like that?
Yes, that sounds right. We started our account management about a year before we started using Custify. So about 3.5 years in now that we've been focusing on our high value customers.
Right. Great. Guys, then let's kick things off. I have already introduced ourselves. So my name is Philipp. Ingmar already mentioned that he is the head of customer success at ChartMogul. So quick agenda today, a little bit understanding the challenges that Ingmar and the team had, like what was the CS team facing. Then what basically happened when they signed up with Custify, but also precisely what tactics did they actually implement in the tool. So we're going to have practical examples for you guys that you can take home with about health, about other things, about onboarding, etc. Yeah, of course, everyone that might think about getting a customer success platform is also interested in ROI or in the results. This is what we typically also hear when we talk to customer success managers that want to get this platform. Typically, the management will ask for ROI, for a business case, so you guys can have a little bit an idea of what Ingmar and the team has been able to achieve. All right, Ingmar, let's kick things off. Maybe we go back 2.5 years, or to start off, maybe you just give us a brief introduction in ChartMogul. Like, what are you guys doing? What is your typical customers looking like? What's the pain that you solve?
Yes. So ChartMogul, we help 2,500 subscription businesses, primarily in SaaS, to measure, understand, and grow their recurring revenue. So our platform, it helps you connect your billing systems And then we create dashboards. We democratize for small to medium-sized businesses a type of BI that usually just get in larger companies that have a data team in place. You can measure things like MRR, churn, and LTV, enrich that data and segment it. We also launched a few months ago a CRM to help you combine your lead, trial, opportunity, and subscription data in a platform to analyze the entire funnel. We noticed some people were already using ChartMogul, partially had some CRM capabilities, so we added this as a second product. And to tell you a little bit about our company, so we're 75 people now. We originally started in Berlin, and then we switched a few years later to a fully remote model. We raised about like 3.6 million US dollars initially, but then we sort of consider ourselves moving a bit more to like a fund-strapped company where we've been growing with our own revenues, and we were profitable quickly enough. We decided to not raise any further money.
Wow, yeah, that's great, and it's a great place to be, specifically in these days. So yeah, congrats on the journey and on the growth. If people are interested later on, I guess they can head over to ChartMogul, or they can also find you on LinkedIn. But we have our contact details also later in the slides. All right. If you think back, what from a CS perspective, what were the challenges that your team was facing?
Yes. So the company initially, when I joined, and I was an early team member, joined about 8 years ago, which is also the age of the company. We focused the first few years really on giving really great customer support, sort of in this early product market fit like stage. Being like really responsive was like a primary focus, to respond really quickly to customers, make it really easy for them to talk to us. And then like we also, our pricing was like pretty like cheap at the time. We didn't really have really large customers, but then like 3-4 years in, we got to a point where we needed account management, where it became apparent that our customers were growing with us. So we had companies that started out very small, became larger business. The requirements were changing. And then we were also starting to sell to new customers, which made us more acutely aware that our onboarding wasn't sufficient, where a lot of it was self-service with a bit of help when people reached out, but we needed to be more structured about how we were onboarding our customers, specifically our like larger customers. And in our customer base, I didn't mention this earlier, but we have about right now 150 customers that we consider managed accounts and larger accounts. And out of these 2,500 customers that we have, then the rest of them would be self-service accounts. And a managed account for us is a customer that pays us at least $1,200 per month. And many of these customers are nowadays on annual like contracts. So in regards to the onboarding, yes, like we needed like a system where we could consistently like track the progress of onboarding, goals, whether we're hitting them or not. This led us then to the next point, also that where we're seeing limited feature adoption. So as we were starting to move customers to annual pricing, and also we moved customers off our legacy pricing. And that was one of the first projects our account management team did, was to like de-grandfather pricing. And once you ask people for more money, it becomes very apparent where they are not getting enough value. So we were seeing that with some of the accounts where they were using ChartMogul in I would say superficial way, where there were all these things that we had released, all these features, but they had only adopted some of the early features. So this was also then an area where we saw with CSMs, we could drive so much more value and be more proactive about it. But we also had data in lots of different systems. So it wasn't that easy to track things, even like very simple things like how often are people using the platform across an account, where you could get like a snapshot in time and intercom, but you couldn't really see over time how does it evolve. And then the last point, unconsolidated customer tracking. So yeah, like having data in lots of different places, where it's in the support CRM, and the sales CRM, and the marketing CRM, and various like other places where we had segmentation data. So to really understand a customer, their behavior, and how it changed over time, it was really cumbersome, and some things we couldn't answer at all without getting some help from engineering to pull data directly from ChartMogul's database.
Right. So so I sense there's this lack of visibility, and that's something that we typically also hear from the CS team. It's just like it's very hard / almost impossible to understand all those things, like, are they onboarding correctly? Do they utilize all the features? And then when I'm before the renewal, you mentioned you switched to the annual. Was in the beginning you guys had monthly plans, and then you switched to annual, or?
Yes, we had very few customers on annual plans, and it became more of a topic where more customers that were at that size wanted to pay annually, have more predictable pricing for the entire year. And that was a challenge for us also, because we are creating a new category. So subscription analytics is a new category for which there is like no budget often in a traditional company model. So that made it a little bit harder to like ask for money or ask for more money in that case. And that over time, like it taught us a lot of like also, where does the value lie? How do our like CSMs sell the value? How does our sales team sell the value of like ChartMogul, and sort of where do we fit in?
And can you give the audience a bit of an idea how big was the CS team at this particular stage, if you remember, like, or approximately? Was it just you, or was there a big team in behind at this stage?
Yeah, so we just had two people who were focusing on account management specifically. There were other people doing support, and we had like a couple people doing solutions engineering, but the account management team was only two people at the time. Plus, like, I would also help this team quite a bit, and when a CSM would be on leave, like I would sometimes take over account management. So it was like two plus my help a bit here and there.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier, when you mentioned the onboarding, specifically right now, you have a kind of a segmented customer base where there is this higher touch, you call it managed accounts, and there's also the self-service, self-managed accounts. Is the CS team also transitioning self-service accounts into the managed accounts, because they, for example, they grow with you, they start maybe smaller and then they grow with you? Does that happen frequently?
Yes, that does happen all the time. And we evaluate this in regular intervals. And then we monitor this in Custify too. We call them up and coming. So we have a segment of customers where we see their revenue is growing, or it could be some specific cases where we know it's a strong brand that we can expand. Maybe they run multiple companies where we know like there's some potential to expand these accounts, where we start to nurture them earlier on, and we assign an account manager. And we're now 11 people like in the CS team, so I've grown a bit, and our functions now, the team is sort of spread between customer support, then we have a customer education team, and we have like the account management team, which is split now between focusing on onboarding. So there are a few people that are dedicated towards just onboarding stage of the customer lifecycle, and then there are a couple people that are just looking after the higher value like accounts for the adoption stage and renewal stage of the life cycles.
All right, guys, there you go. These were the challenges. If you have any questions, drop them in the questions tab so we can answer them later. But that was the situation about 2.5 years ago from Ingmar and the team. Let's see how they manage those things and what they actually managed to do with Custify. And Ingmar, I still remember also your onboarding with Custify. I think that was about 2.5 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, maybe you explain a little bit, like what were the first things you did, or what were the first steps that you did with Custify, and how did that work?
Yeah, so about like a year into running our account management, we realized that as tracking things manually in a spreadsheet was not going to cut it, and we knew that we wanted to switch to a platform to particularly do health scoring. So we did that for several quarters in a spreadsheet, which was very instructive because it sort of gave us some early ideas of what we should track, what is important. And we just had someone update manually the spreadsheet, and that helped to do things like, do like activity check-ins, like do who are the key people on an account, like mapping that out, creating sort of these account maps, like what are the feature requests like that they need, open support tickets, like discussions, trying to log everything in a spreadsheet and update it. And then once we started looking at CS platforms, I looked at superficially on a high level at like 10, and then I narrowed it down. So for us, we were like a company where we felt clearly we didn't qualify for like a setup of a Gainsight or Totango. So there's these platforms that are sort of serving the high level, where it's usually, I think, companies that have 100 people or more at least, where they also the implementation is much more complex. And we wanted a system that ideally had a lot of integrations in place where it would minimize our effort that we needed to undertake to integrate, where it would like already naturally integrate with our stack. And then we also wanted a platform that understood us as a business. And that's where there was a big differentiation that was clear between other platforms out there, many of them that had been around for a number of years too, that are sort of serving smaller, medium-sized businesses that were sort of a bit like a catch-all platform where they are serving all sorts of software businesses. But we wanted a platform that was particularly tailored towards the SaaS business. And Custify was very unique in that sense, where I felt immediately when I saw the demo and how the UI was designed, also the roadmap, the thinking out the roadmap, where I thought this is a platform where we can grow alongside Custify, and we can use Custify for many years, because I knew that this would be an investment, a bit of time to go through the stage of implementation and onboarding. And for us, like the initial onboarding, what really helped us was that the Custify team, they did, which instilled also a lot of confidence, is that they mapped out our customer journey with us and spent quite a bit of time, like over a call, to like walk through what a ChartMogul customer would go through with us. And then they came back with a really great implementation plan and also suggestions of what else they thought we should actually track when it comes to health scoring. So there was the piece of really helping us make a plan that gave us an idea of the effort of the building an integration into our own database. And then like they also had fulfilled all these requirements of integrating with Recurly, with Zendesk, with like Intercom and other systems that we used, where we knew like that would really save us quite a bit of time, and Zapier, where we could get all the data into Custify.
If you remember, the first thing that you set up, I know that we have the client view. Was that the first thing that you actually set up in Custify, or? How did you what was the priority for the team when you think
Yes.
about the challenges before? Like what were the things where you said like this is where what we tackled first?
I would say, yeah, like this view that you see here. So my first goal was to automate the spreadsheet, where we had the spreadsheet in place and we wanted to extend it and like automate it, where we could see like in one view, like all the accounts we were managing and have that health scoring model. So what you see here, this is sort of the advanced version of this over time, where we have this global health score that in Custify, it is derived from all these other health scores. You see some of them, and they are more on the right, like
I
where
think
it's yeah, here you
them
see
here on
like
this
all of
screen, yeah.
them, like where it's we have a monthly activity, number of support tickets, CSM rating, which is qualitative score, people leaving a post regularly when they talk to customers, number of training sessions we conduct, surveys from NPS, and then we have a product adoption, a product events score, which is data that comes from our database, where one is more related to the initial setup of features and the other one is sort of ongoing events. And seeing all these things on like one view like helped me as a manager to really get a good understanding of how we're doing and to set priorities, what to focus on in account management when we are still pretty early on and trying to like figure out how to really do this. You can see here, this was also an immediate value add, was sort of seeing the activity. So here, this looks good. Like this is an account where activity increased. And you can drill down into that further and would be able to see like how many users actually per day, per month. And then we can also see things like the actual like events. So this would be give you more resolution on the product adoption or the product events. And in this case here is like someone exported some data, or like they like two different exports are mentioned here. And you can really show all these different like events that you're tracking in a visualization as well on a per account level. So Custify had a high level view, but it also really helped you to drill down if you want to prepare for a call with the customer and understand as much as possible about how they're currently using ChartMogul, or you're preparing for a renewal and you want to really get a 360 of what's going on with the account. I was able to answer all these questions pretty quickly, which empowered our account managers, and it made my job much easier too.
So this actually answered one of my questions I had, like when does your team, or when do you actually typically look at this data? So as preparation of a meeting, renewal calls, QBRs, those like check-in calls for the customers. That's when you typically look at a deeper dive into the usage of utilization of a customer.
Yes, exactly. And we try to set goals, and we found that for certain things like QBRs, and that's sort of a customer success topic that one could argue about how to go about this, but we try to be a bit like religious about like doing QBRs, where we initially we have to do QBRs, but we realized that for some customers, it's not necessary to do QBRs like to every quarter to like talk to them. If we can see in the data, they're doing well, they don't have any questions. So we sort of changed our approach of how we think about QBRs. But yes, like renewals is like a big one. It comes up once a year. In some cases, there are a few customers that have biannual like renewals, but majority are annual on annual plans, or they're on monthly plans. And then training, whenever we do any training, during the onboarding stage, we do quite a bit of training, and then we also have some adoption training to nurture accounts. So for these like sessions, it could be something specific. For example, a customer might be migrating from one billing system to another, which would really impact the analytics too. And there's some things we need to do in order to ensure accuracy and continuity of the data. So for that, we have a training session and we'll get on a call with the customer, and then like looking at Custify, we have everything there to prepare for such a call much faster than we could before.
Mentioning these life cycles is actually great. You prepared a slide, and I understand we don't necessarily need to understand everything that is written here. So guys, if you can't read that all in detail, but yes. I think it's worth to kind of give a little bit of advice to the audience here, how you guys map the customer journey and what part
yes.
of those of this mapping did you actually do in Custify, because this here is an entire customer journey from the marketing awareness all the way through until the renewal or cancellation. So this was kind of a prep work that you did before you even implemented Custify, right?
Yeah, so we did like a simplistic, I would say, model of this, but I almost wish I would have thought this through a bit deeper. So I realized when starting with the Custify implementation, talking to the team, that I had a lot of blind spots, and this version was actually done afterwards, where I realized, okay, if I really want to drive a good experience across the whole customer journey, I need to be able to understand it, and I need to be able to also influence the customer journey across other departments as well. And we need to be unified, where we're even things like using the same language, right? If you are using different language for the same things in like marketing and sales versus customer success, it will confuse the customer. So like I wanted to map out what are the KPIs across each stage, what are the objectives, and what are the activities that we currently do. And this really helped me to improve the customer life cycle significantly. And this is a 10-page document that's linked to this. This is the simple visualization of everything. And then I have a 10-page document that goes into detail. I spent quite a bit of time trying to understand this across the whole company. And that then helped me really to improve upon it. And for what we do in Custify, we are right now using it for onboarding, adoption, renewal stages. And we initially also had another stage in there we called advocacy stage, but we dropped that. And that would be an advice, as like when you sort of start out with like doing account management, if it's still new, it's still in the early stages for your company, is to sort of keep things simple. There's always a tendency when you look at blogs and you read about health scoring and how to do, success management, is to go to complex because a lot of the information that one reads, it might be a company with hundreds of employees that are using a strategy that's way too complex for a smaller business. And it's good to think about the size of your team and what you can actually accomplish. And I believe that whenever you are trying to do a lot of things cross-functionally, you will never do them really great. Eventually, you will have the luxury of having a dedicated team member like us, where we have an onboarding team now that's just focusing on onboarding. And I think that's something for you to think about, like what are the sort of high value activities that will really move the needle when it comes to churn and retention, and who will be able to do them, and can you do them consistently well, and to like be really mindful of what do you start in terms of initiatives to do things that you can really do repeatedly well until you like have more people in the team to like do more. So for us, like here in Custify, for the onboarding lifecycle, there's a qualitative element that we actually, the CSM has to track, which is why the onboarding stage, it doesn't complete automatically in Custify. The actual account manager will have to say onboarding is done, and then we're moving someone to a higher life cycle and hand that account over to another account manager. So from the qualitative side, it's things like validating the data with the customer. That's something we cannot measure. It's like, do they have edge cases in their billing that we need to like address, maybe do some data cleaning, and maybe we need to help them get all their data in from various places. Maybe some integrations we can have one click, and some data they need to send from other places. And then there's the data-driven components. It's like getting enough users on the account that we can measure and Custify, getting a certain number of training sessions. We have some mandatory training that we do for accounts, and then getting the health score up to a certain minimum level, which includes all those important things like resolving open support tickets, getting their activity to a certain level, their product adoption, their product events.
So that means your specifically the onboarding, as we learned earlier, was a challenge. That means now in Custify, you monitor the onboarding process, and parts of what makes the customer, let's say, onboarded in your definition from your team is data driven, as in what they do with the platform, how often they use it, and etc. But part is also a subjective, let's say, check off that the CSM basically grants, right? So you have kind of this hybrid step there. Okay, great.
Where we understand exactly, we know what those steps are that we need to complete. But you're right. We need to get this qualitative sign off. And like one part, as we were like using Custify and sort of getting deeper into account management, we realized that we needed like structured training as well, where we were initially a CSM would help the customers all sorts of things, but then we saw some patterns where customers were asking about similar things, and that's when we realized, okay, we need to come up with a training program. And we actually extended the team where we have 2 people that are now just working on customer education, where they are maintaining the help center, our developer documentation, and they also like design the curriculum and the sessions for our training program, where we have 11 sessions now in there. So we have a dedicated deck that's like nicely designed, and a process how to run these sessions, and people trained in the team to run these sessions, where customers can book these self-service. This is powered by like Calendly. This is a hidden website that we can share with like customers where they can book these. But sometimes we also just prescribe some of these sessions in email conversations, in a support ticket, and directly schedule with the CSM. And we have sessions that are particular catered towards onboarding, and some that are particularly catered towards the adoption lifecycle.
Yeah, this is a question that we get often asked, where like when customers start with, how should we define a customer as in completed the onboarding? So I think this is a great example of a hybrid environment where there are data-driven parts. Obviously, someone has to log into ChartMogul. Obviously, someone has to connect their data to ChartMogul. Otherwise, you probably don't see anything. But then there's a subject part where there's a product training and also kind of a sign off of a CRM. So I think this is something great from a best practice perspective. I know that you guys are also working quite a lot with the automation. Can you give the audience an idea of the approximate book of business from your team? Like what's the typical number of customers that someone in the managed account teams is having in their portfolio?
Yes. So we have right now about 50 or 50, 60 per like CSM. And it used to be more. We used to like go to initially, like we were much higher, like 80 or 90. But for our type of business, because ChartMogul is a very sort of like there are some technical elements in the initial like onboarding setup, like, and it's I would say like a bit of like a high touch like account management. We realized like we actually needed like to reduce that number quite a bit, and like we got a lot of value from these like playbooks when we do account management, and this is something that I would say we got immediate value from Custify, because we knew from our 1 year of doing this manually what are things that trigger a risk in an account. And based on that, we had set that up immediately in Custify within the first few weeks or month of implementing. And I immediately got these alerts in Slack why thought like, wow, this is like a game changer, because before we would maybe become aware of something like this like weeks later at best. So things like an account owner changing, for example, where we need to establish a new relationship, like, and
Your
there's a
champion
lot
left,
of,
basically.
yeah, which means we have to resell the value of ChartMogul, where a new person comes in and they're like, oh, renewal, oh, is this much money, or why should we do this? And it
Who
actually
are you?
really, yeah. And it's like 2 weeks before the renewal, a week before the renewal, realize there's a new person
Right.
there. It's like, oh, this is like really hard to turn things around then sometimes.
Yeah.
So that was something where we immediately get an alert. There's a new account owner. We'll like reach out. We try to build a relationship. Like, this doesn't mean it's not a magic bullet. There's still situations that maybe we can't turn things around, like where like it doesn't prevent every churn, but it does give us the power to influence it more and at the right time. And I think timing, as all of us having worked in CS, like, no, like timing can be very important. So like other alerts, like when someone removed a data source, or there's something happening in their account where we know their value goes down. Maybe there's sort of some issue with the integration, data is not syncing properly. If we reach out proactively, we can solve that problem quickly with the customer together. And that will like make a big difference.
I can see here one example is, for example, there's no data source anymore. That means basically your solution in that moment, if that happens, is out of, like, doesn't solve anything anymore for the customer,
Yes.
right? So this is
Which is
extremely critical.
essentially worthless. Yeah, like, and it might be that, you know, the person who has to do something about it is one of the admins, and there might be another like 30 people on the account that are logging in. They're like, oh, it's ChartMogul is broken.
It looks okay,
Yeah,
but it
like,
doesn't. Yeah.
yeah. So, and they can't do anything about it. So it's very specific people too that we have to talk to, where we know like, okay, this is our technical contact on the account. And that's something also over time where we're like tracking this in Custify, where we know like, okay, these are all the roles. We're like, change something over time. That's something we learned also from Custify, is that it's really important to know who you're talking to in the company. And so we actually added a field in the product. And this is how I feel like when I was talking about lifecycle management, and you're trying as a head of CS or even as a CSM, you're trying to influence customer success across an organization. So like for me, I'm learning something and I'm going to the product team and saying like, hey, we need this field. I think this would be valuable for our marketing team and for our CS team. So we added a field where customer sets who they are in the company, where I know now, okay, this person works in customer success. He works in the product team, marketing team, and that is like super valuable in many different ways. And when talking to customers, or when trying to also add value to what they do on a day-to-day basis.
And Ingmar, I know you also are running surveys with your customers, NPS in particular, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. So we do this. We initially did this quarterly, but we over time switched to doing it biannually, which we found was enough. We found every 3 months was a bit too much.
Too much. Yeah.
And like 6 months was a good cadence. So we initially did this out of Typeform with Intercom, and then we like switched directly to Custify once they built that feature. And this is a cool example also of sort of showing like that Custify is building the right things that we need, where this was not there when we started with Custify, and then they added it and it made our life easier. It's now all automated and it's easy to explore this data in there. And it immediately impacts the health scoring model. And what I like in Custify too is when I'm on an account page, I can see all the different ratings of that account in one place easily and sort of compare how it changed over time.
Over time.
So that is also really cool.
And then you mentioned initially that there's also the investment. So that means there is a and we can actually bring that bigger here on the screen because it's a good result.
Yeah.
So you guys also have to report for the investors, and there's also data in Custify that you use for that.
Yeah. Oh, on a monthly basis, we put an investor report together in Google Sheets. So for all the different departments, you can see some of the tabs down there. And this is just one piece out of my section. There are many others, but we get multiple data points from Custify now really easily that I can just export and plug into this investor report. Here we're looking at average usage per account on a weekly and monthly basis, and how we're able to drive this up over time, both with like better success management, but also product improvements. And then
It looks
some
like
of
almost
it,
like a
yeah,
50% increase over the time. If I look at
yes,
some roughly. And these little
definitely.
bumps there, I think you mentioned those are Christmas times, right? So
Yeah, like always around like the holidays, like the usage
yeah,
drops like significantly
makes sense.
when people celebrate Christmas and New Year's.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, guys, there you go. Let's speak a little bit out of the results in respect of time. I think we don't go through everything, but if you had to pick like 2 or 3 main things where it would also help the audience, specifically if they might not have a tool yet, what are the things that you would, if you know back, you would go back to your management and say, hey, we need this tool because.
Mm-hmm. I would say like the strongest sale to a management team is always that we want to improve revenue retention
Yeah.
and drive that up over time. And this is something we're like focusing on, like high value customers. Like I believe now they make up nearly half of our revenue comes from these like 150 something accounts. So over time, it became more and more clear that we need to focus resources there. So that was very clear to like our CEO, like that we need to focus resources there. And then when we're laying out the problems that we're like trying to solve and how they're resulting in higher churn rates, like reviewing sort of churn with our leadership team and the reasons for churn, we could link it back very well to sort of these things that we fail to do out of the things that are in our power. So it's a combination, I think, of having really good feedback mechanism where you can really back up the data. I think that always helped when trying to get something from me as a head of CS. It's like, how can I back this up with data where I find, like being really data driven when it comes to customer feedback, of doing surveys like NPS, doing CSAT on support interactions, and then also doing exit interviews with customers, and like having churn reporting in place for self-service also. You get all this data that you need to sort of show like where did we fail, and then when you can make that clear how that ties to like revenue, that's a really strong point. And like then understanding the risk in real time, right? Like where sort of time is the factor, and saving people time in the team to do their work is also a very clear value add, where you can show like, okay, like this took this long before, or it's really complicated and that's why it's taking this long. That's also good, like a value add. Or maybe some things you can't do at all because you don't have the right data, can't answer certain questions.
And like, if I think of like my team, if my team would come to me and say, hey, I need this new software, it's gonna cost X, I would ask them, okay, give me some concrete numbers. And I know that we talked about it, and you have prepared one number that is actually something quite easy to understand for almost anyone, right? So, and this example, it's what we already talked about before, is this renewal conversations that you have specifically for the annual ones. And there's a significant time win that you had. So can you explain a little bit how it looked before? What did you have to do now before, and how does this work right now? The preparation for a renewal call. And additional question, is that something you do mandatory with everyone, or do you pick particular customers that you do this from a best practice perspective, this renewal conversations?
Yeah, so these for the ones that go through annual renewals, we do it with every customer, where we go through and we prepare a deck where we show them, like, this is sort of your usage of your account. These are the features that you're like underutilizing. This is like maybe things we've done that you've asked for in the last year, where you had this feature request and we've released these things, things like that. And like now in Custify, we have everything in one place, and it's sort of easy to pull the data, where we know, like, this is a list of things we need to prepare, and we need to just look in one place. So it significantly reduces the effort, but it's also, we can answer questions that we couldn't really answer that well before, or not at all, because we couldn't easily track that data. Like I mentioned, if I need to get some data from an engineer to explain something, I might very well never get it in time. So it's really hard always to get engineering resources, even if it's for a larger account. It needs to be a really compelling reason. I need to be really able to show, like, this account will churn if we don't do this. Maybe then, if it's someone paying us $100,000 a year, they're
I need to go into offices and have some small bribes with you.
Yeah, sure. It used to be nice, actually, when I was sitting in an office next to an engineer when I was working in the Berlin office, because I could sometimes ask the engineer sitting right next to me, hey, can you do this for me quickly, please? And that sort of was a nice thing, remote versus like actually being in an office, to sometimes get these little favors.
And I know that this is kind of our last slide, guys, but this might be really, really valuable for everyone out there, because this is kind of what I asked Ingmar also to think about. Like, what are the learnings? What would you do differently if you would go through this entire journey again? Like, what are the things that helped you a lot, and retrospectively, what would you have done differently in a preparation?
I would say, like, really understanding your customer journey, and particularly also your customer segmentation of sort of drilling down, like, who are your best fit customers. And when you look at your CS strategy and you're trying to do all sorts of, sometimes firefighting, maybe you don't have a lot of resources, you're trying to figure out what to focus on. And sometimes the issue can be that some of the customers you spent a lot of time on are just not good fit customers that you onboarded at some point. They like joined, maybe your product evolved, and maybe they were a good fit customer, but then your product changed and they're not anymore, or they've outgrown your product. And so there was an element where I learned also afterwards that I needed to influence, like, the marketing team, the sales team, like, which customers are we bringing in? We've defined over time more clearly who are our ideal customer profiles. So sort of figuring out, like, who are your customers? How do you serve them? Where do you focus your energy, and where do you not focus your energy? And then, customer journey mapping are really important. Expect to embrace the learning curve. So I would say there's, you can't plan for everything. Some things just evolve over time as your company grows. You're building your new processes, and your team changes. So I'd mentioned, like, initially we had a CSM work all lifecycle stages, and then we had the resource eventually to break it up into like onboarding and a higher lifecycle adoption and renewal. So that like happened over time, and I think we were like learning as we went along how we're gonna like fine tune the system. So it took a bit of time to fine tune Custify, where we I would say needed to learn more about how to define the strategy, how to like work with our customers, and that, like, I think Custify really sped things up as much as possible, where we got sort of some initial value within the first month, but when you are
sorry, that was actually one of the questions, like when did you see the first
yeah,
value, and how long did this implementation take? So first months, you say, and then that
I
was a
would say,
fine-tuning process.
yeah, health scoring took fine-tuning, and that took like a good few months where I was starting to feel like, oh, this is getting better now. And I think that's something where you need to budget when you implement such a platform, even with a great team like Custify, where the support is really fantastic throughout the process. I must say, you still have some of your own homework to do in terms of answering questions, and Custify team did really good job surfacing what those questions are, but then also having engineering resources, not just for the initial implementation, but also to do a few additional things during the fine-tuning stage, where I realized, oh, I want to add these extra data points into my health scoring calculations. I need to send them. I needed a bit more engineering time to do that. And luckily, we allotted for this early on to have an engineer still available for a couple more months to do that. And then after that, it's really just in longer intervals that one has to maintain and do additional work.
So first value quite quickly. Then one of the questions here in the room is what are the internal resources that were crucial for the implementation? I understand there was someone from the technical team for the initial one, but you made sure that doing those smaller iterations, and I'm guessing there was additional data to be sent from your platform, so you could fine tune certain things. You also were kind of going back every now and then to enhance some of the implementation in your own product, right?
That's correct. So I would say that also the things we learned from Custify, they also influenced our product design to some degree, where we realized, okay, onboarding is ineffective because of XYZ. If we want a customer to validate their data and understand it, how can we make the UI better, the documentation better, the tooling? So it's not just the CSM work that sort of changed. It was also all these other things that result in customer success that we then influenced through that.
Got it. Well, Ingmar, thank you so much. Guys, if you want to also get a consulting call with one of our specialists, you can reach out to me directly. You can find us on custify.com. Feel free to go over there and hit us up for a product demo if you're interested in learning more. You can find Ingmar on LinkedIn. We're going to share those also in the follow-up email. Hit him up on LinkedIn if you want to know more about his journey. And you, of course, can go to ChartMogul.com if your team wants also more BI insights, more insights about of your business. The typical user, Ingmar, of ChartMogul is who in the company? Is a management or CFO? Who's the typical user that you have?
It's actually across the whole team. So the customers that use ChartMogul effectively, they have their whole company on ChartMogul and are really data driven when it comes to revenue generation, because realistically, revenue is impacted by lots of different teams. Product might be doing tests with pricing and packaging. Then you have the marketing team, tracking things like trial to paid conversion rates. You have the sales team where you can track attainments in ChartMogul, the CSM and the CS team, you can look at retention for a particular CSM. And then the leadership team, looking at sort of high level, growth, directional, KPIs. So it's really for everyone. That's what's meant to be for the whole company.
Because I remember also that you guys don't charge per user; it's more per revenue. So I can add the entire company without any cost, and that's a data-driven company. Great. Now I think we answered some of those questions throughout the presentation. Regarding one question was, how long did it take you to get the first value? You mentioned it was a month or so, but then a refinement process. It's critical to have someone from the technical resources. Did you at this point in time have any data warehouse or mix panel or anything, or was that a native integration?
So we didn't have anything else. So it was a native integration. We have since implemented Segment, and we are considering to send data to Custify in the future from Segment. But at the time, any integration work we did, it was a unique integration. And we did need, I didn't answer that fully, so we did need a product manager, or that helped me in the process of integrating. I had one of our product managers and one engineer allotted for a certain period of time, where we had a few weeks of integration time. It was not really continuous work, but it's sort of, we made little changes, and we like looked at it and like Custify, gave some feedback. So it went through stages through a few weeks to get the initial setup done over about a month.
Got it. Great. There's one last question that we can answer eventually that might also help the audience. And this is like, did you have to create a business case, or how did you prove the value for the tool? Like, was there something that you had to do, or were you in the great situation of your management said, go and get a tool because they realized this is not working with the spreadsheets anymore?
Yeah, I would say it was, for me, a pretty easy case at the time, because we had enough revenue and profits in the company where I had the full trust of our CEO. And I think that's something that happened over time, where I feel over a period of several years, and now I'm 8 years at ChartMogul, where like I was sort of left to my own devices after a few years of building trust with the CEO, where I think he got to a point with many of the senior leadership team where he just leaves it to us to make the decisions or of what we think is like best. And we've like proven over time that we are like sort of careful in how we use money. We've always been a capital efficient business. So we've had that discipline. Is we haven't been raising round after round where we don't have unlimited resources, where we've always been doing quite a bit of thinking to invest our money where it really matters. And we still are very much a product-led growth company, where over half of our like resources on product and engineering. That's where we funnel most of our like new revenues that we get. And so we are very like careful and critical when it comes to evaluating tools to really think deeply, do we really need it? And we evaluated for multiple months, like platforms, like what they can do. So I've done a really thorough like process to think this through, like, will this really help? What can the platforms do? I had a whole list of questions that I was trying to answer for myself, and I created a Notion document for each company I was evaluating and was going through all these questions.
Well, I'm more than happy, Ingmar, that in the end, Custify was the platform that you chose. I wanted to thank you so much that you shared today all the learnings, all the experience, the best practices with the audience. So yeah, thank you so much, Ingmar, for being here today. I appreciate it a lot.
It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Guys, again, hit us up on LinkedIn, send us an email, sign up for Custify for a demo, go to chartmogul.com if you want to know more about their platform. And thank you also so much for joining today's webinar. Wish you all a great rest of your week. Happy Wednesday, and we stay in touch. Thank you, Ingmar, for joining.
Thank you, Philipp. Talk to you soon.
Bye, Ingmar. Ciao.